Hi kids! Morning has come to the sunny city. Tony the truck drives out of his garage. He goes to find his friend, Tractor Joe. Tony promised to help him bring hay to the farm to feed the animals. Going to the farm, Tony saw his friend Joe and greeted him. Friends joyfully met each other. After that, Tony and Joe drove across the bridge to the field for sheaves of hay. Arriving at the place, Tony the truck stopped next to the sheaves of mowed hay. Tractor Joe lowers the hook and grabs one of the sheaves. After that, he loads into Tony's trailer. Friends were in a hurry because the farm animals had to be fed as soon as possible. After loading the rest of the hay, the cars drove back to the farm. Along the way, they meet their friend, Willie, the loading crane. Tony and Joe stopped and asked him to help unload the hay. Willie, of course, agreed, because he loved helping his friends. Securing the first haystack, Willie raised the hook and began to turn the jib. He decided to put hay next to the animal feeder. Lowering the pile, Willie continued his work. Joe gathered a lot of hay from the field. He was afraid that it might rain and soak the food, so the machines had to do a good job. Willie's jib was very powerful, so the crane skillfully controlled it. With the hook down, Willie picked up a haystack and laid it on the rest of the pile. After giving it a little thought, Joe invited his friends to help him build a storehouse for hay and grain. The friends agreed without hesitation because it might rain any moment. Having finished unloading hay, Joe immediately rushed to feed the farm animals. He rode up to the hay and grabbed one of the sheaves with the hook. After that, he drove it to the feeder. There were a lot of birds, cows, horses on the site, so Joe decided to take a few more sheaves. After finishing their work, the machines turned for help in the construction of the granary. First, Tony the truck drove out to the sheriff to call a rescue helicopter. The sheriff immediately went to the helipad. Upon arrival, he told the helicopter to fly to the garage for the rest of the construction team. Meanwhile, Tony the truck and Joe the tractor set off to wait for the rest of the team near the city bridge. Hearing the sheriff, Thomas takes off into the air and flies towards the garage. Flying over the city and hovering over the garage, he told the cars that the sheriff was assembling construction team and they should go to the city bridge. Friends started the engines and drove to the collection point. There, out of the garage, drove out Dory the crane, Nick the fire truck, and Alfred the road roller. Meanwhile, Thomas flew up to the ambulance and informed her of the general meeting. After that, he flew onto the sandpit where Ben the excavator worked. Hearing about the general meeting, Ben picked up his bucket and hurried to go to the city. When he finally got to the right place, all the cars were already assembled. Ben parked next to the ambulance. Tony told the rest of the machines that they needed to build a granary on the farm because the hay and grain could not stand in the open. It may rain at any time and soak the food. Having discussed the further plan of action, the team went to work on the farm. Ben, the excavator, was the first to start the work. He needed to prepare the site for construction. He stopped at the working site and lowered the bucket. After that, he began to gradually remove excess land. He worked quickly, knowing that the friends needed to build a barn as soon as possible. Having finished his work, the excavator parked next to the farmhouse. Before leveling the place, Nick, the fire truck, stopped and began to water the site for construction of the barn. Nick tried his best. If he soaks the earth incorrectly, Alfred, the road roller, will not be able to level it. And so, Alfred got down to business. He began to quickly level the place. Friends worked very well. While Alfred was doing his work, he thought about how building a granary was very important. Grain and hay should gradually be prepared for the winter, and rain should not soak the food. Alfred also finished his work and parked next to Ben the excavator, waiting for another assigned job. Meanwhile, Dory and Tony went to the sawmill for the construction boards. Having loaded all the remaining boards, the friends hurried back to the farm to continue the construction of the granary. Unloading all the building material, Tony parked next to the farmhouse. Willie and Dory, the two cranes, hurried to begin construction of the barn. The cranes drove up to the loaded boards. Willie lowered the hook and secured it to the first board. Meanwhile, Ben the excavator also wanted to help his friends. He decided to go towards the city to dig a hole for the planting of flowers. Arriving at the place, the machine began to skillfully wield its bucket. While Ben was doing his job, Dory and Willie have already laid beams for the future roof. And then a misfortune happened. Willie's construction winch broke down and he could not continue his work. An ambulance named Ralph hurried to help his friend. When the car drove up to the place, Willie began to tell him about his problem. Ralph could not refuse to help his friend and set to work. While Ralph and Willie went about their business, Dory stood at the construction site and waited for her friend. And now, Willie's hook is fixed. He thanks his friend for the help. Ralph drove back to town and Willie set to work. Meanwhile, Ben, the excavator, was already finishing digging a hole for the planting of flowers. His bucket was very powerful. Willie and Dory finished their work. The crane hooked the last board and put it on the base of the roof. Ben began to dig a second hole. During work, he dug out an interesting thing. Having examined it a little, Ben realized that he had found Jean's wheel, the concrete mixer, which she had recently lost. Without hesitation, Ben went to the garage to inform Jean about his find. After that, he went to Ralph, the ambulance, to ask him to attach the found wheel to the concrete mixer. Reaching the place and talking about the problem, Ben and Ralph drove into the garage. Jean, the concrete mixer, pulled up to the spot where the wheel lay. Ralph got to work. After some time, the wheel was repaired. Jean was very happy because now she could easily ride through the streets of the city. Willie and Dory, meanwhile, began to lay the roof. They mounted reed rods on the newly constructed beams. With its help, water will not be able to seep out and soak the food for the farm animals. The work went very quickly, and friends were finishing the construction of the barn. The cars secured the reed stacks tightly to each other because they tried to make the roof as reliable as possible. Clouds over the city began to gather. Friends noticed that it would rain soon, which means that they needed to hurry. Tony the truck went to help bend the excavator. Tony loaded a flour into the trailer and began to bring it to the dugout hole. Securing the cable to the flour, Tony began to move forward. And now the flour was in the pit. Then the team covered it up with soil. Dory and Willie finished installing the reeds on the roof. Now they needed to raise a wooden sheet to make the structure more reliable and protected. They fastened the hooks to the board and began to raise the jibs up. And now the wooden board is installed. The builders have finished their work. Meanwhile, Joe began to feed the farm animals. He carried several sheaves of hay to the feeder. After that, the tractor immediately began to transfer all remaining stocks to the constructed granary. The barn was wide, so Joe easily put all the sheaves inside. Today, the cars have worked a lot. The hard day was over. If you want to see more interesting stories about Team of Friends, subscribe to our channel. Also, watch our other videos. Good luck, guys. Bye.